Chapter 1. The night she stopped running, the forest had no mercy for the lost. Alara stumbled through the undergrowth, her breath ragged, her dress torn at the hem where it had caught on briars an hour ago, or was it two? Time had become meaningless since she'd fled the estate, since she'd discovered the letters hidden in her late husband's study. Letters that proved he'd sold her family's land to pay gambling debts. Letters that revealed his mistress. Letters that made a fool of her grief. She'd run. Not with a plan, just with the need to be anywhere but that house full of lies. Now the trees pressed close, skeletal branches clawing at the moonless sky. Her feet ached. Her hands were scratched and bleeding. She should stop, should think, should have screamed her through the darkness. Not hers. Someone else's, high and terrified, cut short with brutal efficiency. Alara froze. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but her legs wouldn't obey. The sound had come from ahead, past the line of ancient oaks that marked the boundary of the old Thorn estate. No one had lived there in decades. Everyone in the village knew the story's disappearances, strange lights. The family that had ruled these lands for centuries before vanishing without explanation. She should go back, but back meant the village, meant questions, meant returning to the house where her husband's body had been buried 3 weeks ago with full honors, while she'd stood at his grave and felt nothing but the weight of wasted years. Forward meant the unknown. She chose forward. The oaks parted, onto a clearing bathed in starlight. In its center stood a circle of standing stones, each one taller than a man, covered in symbols that seemed to writhe in her peripheral vision. And at the base of the largest stone a body. No. 2 bodies. Alara's hand flew to her mouth. A woman lay crumpled on the ground, her throat torn open, her eyes staring at nothing. Standing over her was a man, if he could be called that. He was tall, impossibly tall, dressed in black that seemed to drink the starlight. His hair fell past his shoulders, dark as pitch, and his hands were covered in blood. He turned to look at her. Alara couldn't breathe, couldn't move. His eyes were wrong, too bright, reflecting light like an animal's, beautiful and terrible at once. She should run. She should scream. You weren't supposed to see this. His voice was low, controlled, with an accent she couldn't place. Old, continental, like something from a history book. Her voice cracked. I didn't mean to, no one ever does. He stepped away from the body with fluid grace, and Alara noticed he cast no shadow despite the starlight. Yet here you are, mortal, alone, witnessing what you shouldn't. The word registered slowly. Mortal, as if he were something else. The woman, Alara managed. Is she dead? No inflection, no remorse. She was a messenger. From House Corvus. They sent her to deliver terms I won't accept. House Corvus. The name meant nothing to Alara, but the way he said it, like it was a fact of nature, like the sun or the tide, made her skin prickle. She took a step back. Her heel caught on a root and she stumbled. In an instant he was there, his hand catching her elbow, steadying her. His touch was ice cold, even through the fabric of her sleeve. Careful. The word was almost gentle. Almost. These woods are dangerous at night. You killed her. Alara pulled her arm free, her heart hammering. I saw you, yes. He didn't deny it, didn't explain. And now you've seen me, which presents a problem. I won't tell anyone. The words tumbled out desperately. I swear, I'll go back to the village. I'll forget. You think I haven't heard that before? Something flickered across his face. Not anger, weariness, as if he'd lived this moment 1,000 times. Mortals always promise silence. Then fear takes hold. They convince themselves they imagined it. Or they run to the church, or the magistrate, seeking protection that won't come. Then what do you want from me? The question hung in the air between them. He studied her with those impossible eyes, and Alara had the distinct sensation of being catalogued, assessed. Her worth measured against some scale she couldn't comprehend. Your name, he said finally. Alara. She lifted her chin, finding some thread of courage in the absurdity of it all. Alara Ashford. Widow. Widow. He repeated the word as if tasting it. Recent? 3 weeks? And you wander the forest at night alone, grieving? Something that might have been amusement touched his mouth. Or running? The accuracy of it stung. Alara felt heat rise to her cheeks despite the cold. That's none of your concern. Perhaps not. He turned, surveying the clearing with the air of someone making a decision. But you've stumbled into matters far beyond your understanding, Alara Ashford. House Corvus doesn't send messengers lightly. If they find you here, a witness, They'll kill you simply to send me a message. Then I'll leave. She took another step back. Right now. You'll never see me again. Too late. He gestured to the tree line, where shapes were moving in the darkness. Too fast to be human. Too silent to be anything natural. They're already here. Alara's blood turned to ice. She counted 4, no, 5 figures emerging from the trees, dressed like him, in dark, outdated clothes, moving with that same predatory grace. Adrian Thorne. One of them spoke, a woman with pale hair and a smile like a knife. We wondered if you'd grown soft, hiding in your crumbling estate, refusing to acknowledge the new order. Camille. Adrian's voice held winter. House Corvus oversteps. House Corvus rules now. Surrender the territory, and we'll make your end quick. No, the word was simple. Final. Camille's smile widened. Then we'll take it, starting with your witness. She moved. Adrian moved faster. He was suddenly between Alara and the vampires because that's what they were. Her mind finally accepted it. Vampires, his body a shield. Run, he said quietly. Alara ran. Chapter 2. Sanctuary in Stony. Alara's lungs burned as she crashed through the underbrush, branches tearing at her skin, her dress, her hair. Behind her, inhuman sounds echoed through the forest snarls, the crack of breaking wood, a scream that ended too abruptly. She didn't look back, couldn't look back. Her foot caught, and she went down hard, palms scraping against stone. Not forest floor. Stone steps, ancient and worn, leading upward through the trees. In the darkness, she could barely make out the shape looming above Thorn Manor. Its gothic spires clawing at the sky like skeletal fingers. The fighting sounds were getting closer. She scrambled up the steps, her hands finding an iron door handle crusted with rust. It shouldn't open. The place had been abandoned for decades, everyone said so. But when she twisted, something gave. With a groan of protesting metal, Alara fell into darkness and kicked the door shut behind her. Silence pressed against her ears, broken only by her ragged breathing. The air smelled of dust and old stone and something else. Candle wax. Impossible. No one had lit a candle here. In light bloomed. She spun. Candles were igniting throughout the vast entry hall, one by one, as if touched by invisible hands. They revealed a space untouched by time or decay. Marble floors gleamed. Tapestries hung perfect and whole on the walls, depicting scenes of moonlit hunts and pale figures in medieval dress. A grand staircase curved upward into shadow. It was beautiful. And utterly wrong. You're faster than you look. Alara's heart seized. Adrian stood at the base of the stairs, somehow already inside, though she'd heard him fighting mere moments ago. His coat was torn at the shoulder, and dark blood to dark to be human stained his collar. But he was alive, if that word applied. How did you? This is my home. He moved past her to the door, drawing a bolt she hadn't noticed in the darkness. Heavy, final. They won't breach it. Not without invitation. They can't come in? Alara's voice shook. Like the stories? Some stories have roots. He turned to face her, and in the candlelight she could see him clearly for the first time. Sharp features, almost cruel in their perfection. Eyes that held centuries. A mouth made for both poetry and violence. A vampire cannot enter a private dwelling without permission. Old magic. Older than houses or politics. But I came in uninvited. You're human. The rule doesn't apply. He tilted his head slightly, studying her with that same unsettling intensity. Why did you run here? This place is feared. I didn't plan it. The steps were just there. Fate has a sense of humor. He gestured toward the stairs. You're bleeding. Come. It wasn't a request, but Alara bristled anyway. I'm not going anywhere with you. You killed that woman. I executed a soldier following orders to kill me. His voice remained level, but something dangerous flickered beneath. House Corvus declared war on House Thorn 6 months ago. Tonight was merely the latest skirmish in a conflict you cannot begin to comprehend. Then explain it to me. Why would I? Because I'm trapped here. The words burst out, edged with hysteria she couldn't quite control. Because you said they'd kill me if they found me, and now I'm locked in a house with a man, a thing that just slaughtered 5 people. 3, he interrupted. I killed 3. The other two fled when they realized I wasn't as weakened as Camille hoped. He paused. And I'm not a thing. I'm a vampire. 347 years old. Born in 1678, turned in 1701 by a maker I later killed for his crimes. I've held this territory since 1803, when the previous lord fell to madness. I've never taken an unwilling life, and I have no intention of harming you. The clinical recitation of horrors left Alara speechless. Now, he continued, your hands are bleeding. You'll track dirt and blood through my home if we don't tend to them. I'd rather not waste the evening cleaning. The absurd domesticity of it, a vampire concerned about housekeeping, startled a laugh from her throat. Hysterical, maybe, but genuine. Something shifted in Adrian's expression. Surprise, perhaps. As if he'd forgotten what laughter sounded like. This way, he said. Softer now. Against every screaming instinct. Alara followed. He led her through corridors lined with paintings of pale aristocrats in ruffs and doublets, their eyes seeming to track her movement. Up the grand staircase to a bathing room that should have been freezing and abandoned, but was somehow warm. The copper tub already filled with steaming water. How Alara started. The house remembers what it should be. Adrian moved to a cabinet, retrieving clean cloths and a bottle of something amber. It's been mine long enough to respond to my presence. Old vampire magic, woven into the stones. He gestured to a chair. Warily, Alara sat. Her hands were worse than she'd thought, palms scraped raw, one fingernail torn, dried blood crusting her knuckles. Adrian knelt before her. The gesture was so unexpected, so strangely courtly, that Alara froze. He took her right hand in his cold fingers, careful touch, and began cleaning the wounds with the amber liquid. It stung, but she bit back any sound. You're not afraid, he observed. I'm terrified. Yet you don't pull away. Alara met his eyes. Would it matter if I did? Yes. The word was quiet, certain. I told you. I don't take unwilling lives. That extends to unwilling touch. The woman in the clearing didn't look willing. His hands stilled. No, she wasn't. She was a soldier sent to kill me, and I defended myself. But I take no pleasure in it. He resumed his work, wrapping her palm in clean linen with unexpected gentleness. I was human once. I remember what it meant to fear the dark. What happened? When you were turned. Another night? That story requires wine and a longer acquaintance. We might have longer than you think. Alara glanced toward the window, where darkness pressed against the glass. You said I can't leave, that they'd kill me. Camille will report to her house that I have a mortal witness. A vulnerability. They'll hunt you to hurt me, so I'm a prisoner. You're under my protection. He finished wrapping her second hand and stood, putting careful distance between them. There's a difference. Is there? I hope so. He moved toward the door, then paused. There are guest chambers on this floor. Choose whichever suits you. I don't sleep at night, but I'll be downstairs if you need me. Don't open any windows. Don't invite anyone inside. And don't wander the east wing. Those rooms haven't been opened in a century. Why not? Because my wife died there, and I'm not ready to face those ghosts. The raw honesty of it stopped Alara's next question cold. Adrian left without another word, closing the door softly behind him. Alone. Alara looked down at her bandaged hands and wondered what kind of monster apologized for old grief. Chapter 3. The habits of the undead. Alara didn't sleep. She'd chosen a room done in deep burgundy and gold, with a 4-poster bed that looked like it belonged in a museum, and windows that faced the forest. She'd bathed, washing away the dirt and blood, and found a nightgown laid out on the bed, silk, outdated in style but clean and soft. More of the house's strange magic, she supposed. Now she sat by the window, wrapped in a velvet dressing gown, watching the sky lighten from black to deep blue. Dawn was coming. What happened to vampires at dawn? Did they burst into flame like the stories said, turn to ash? Or did they simply sleep? A soft knock at her door made her jump. Come in, she called, before remembering she probably shouldn't invite anyone into her room. But it was too late. Adrian entered, carrying a silver tray laden with food: fresh bread, butter, jam, sliced fruit, cheese, cold meat. The scent made her stomach clench with sudden hunger. She hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. You didn't have to, she began. You're human. Humans need sustenance. He set the tray on the writing desk near her chair. I'm afraid I don't keep fresh milk or eggs. The bread is from the village. I had it brought in last evening before. Everything. You have people who bring you food? I have arrangements. He remained standing, hands clasped behind his back, in a posture that suggested military training. The village believes I'm an eccentric scholar who keeps odd hours. They leave supplies at the gate twice weekly. I leave payment. No one enters the grounds, until I did, until you did. A ghost of something that might have been amusement crossed his face. Eat. We need to talk about what happens next. Alara reached for the bread, tearing off a piece and spreading it with butter. It was good real butter, Probably from the village dairy. She ate slowly, aware of him, watching with that unblinking focus that marked him as other. Don't you need to sleep? She asked between bites. Isn't sunrise dangerous? Yes and yes. He moved to the window, keeping carefully to one side where the growing light wouldn't touch him. I'll rest soon, but I wanted to explain some things first. Rules that will keep you safe. Rules? The house is sanctuary, but only if you follow them. He counted on his fingers, a strangely human gesture. First, never invite anyone inside, no matter what they say, no matter how they appear. Vampires can take many forms, and Camille is particularly skilled at deception. Alara swallowed hard. What kind of forms? Animals, mist, sometimes the faces of the dead if they've fed recently enough to fuel the magic. His voice remained clinical, but she heard the distaste beneath. Second, don't leave the house or grounds without me, even in daylight. House Corvus has mortal servants, thralls, we call them. Humans bound by blood and magic to serve vampire masters. That's horrible. It's forbidden by the old laws, but Corvus has never cared for tradition. He turned from the window to face her fully. Third, if I seem strange or distant during the day, don't be alarmed. Day sleep isn't true unconsciousness, but it's close. I'll be aware of threats but sluggish, vulnerable. The admission surprised her. Why tell me that? Because you'll notice. And I'd rather you understand than fear. He paused, seeming to choose his next words carefully. I'm trusting you with my safety, Alara. That's not something I do lightly. I could kill you. The words slipped out before she could stop them. While you sleep. Yes. No hesitation. You could. The heart or the head, anything else heals given time. But you won't. How do you know? Because you didn't run screaming when I told you what I am. Because you're still here, asking questions instead of looking for weapons. Because he stopped himself, jaw tightening. Because what? Because I'm a very old vampire, and I've learned to read people. Their hearts, their intentions. His eyes held hers. You're angry at the world that betrayed you, but you're not cruel. Cruelty requires a coldness you don't possess. The accuracy of it stole her breath. He'd seen through her in the space of hours, past the widow's weeds and propriety, straight to the fury she'd been taught to hide. You said you had a wife, Alara said quietly, changing the subject before he could see too much. What happened to her? Pain flickered across his features, brief but unmistakable. Consumption. In 1845, she was mortal. I never turned her, though she asked near the end. I couldn't bring myself to curse her with this existence. So she died. So she died. He moved to the door, and she saw the weariness in the set of his shoulders. I've been alone since, by choice. It's simpler that way, until a widow crashed into your forest. Until that, yes. Something that might have been a smile touched his mouth. Rest today, Alara. I'll wake at sunset. We'll discuss what to do about House Corvus then. Wait, she stood, setting aside the tray. If I'm going to be trapped here, I need something to do. I'll go mad just sitting in this room. Adrian considered this. The library is on the second floor, West Wing. Thousands of books I've been collecting for centuries. You may read whatever you like. Thank you. He nodded and turned to leave, then paused in the doorway. Alara, the East Wing. I meant what I said. Don't go there. I won't. Good. He hesitated as if weighing whether to say more. My wife's name was Catherine. She loved roses. I haven't been able to enter her room since the day she died. Some griefs don't heal, even with centuries. Then he was gone. The door clicking softly shut. Alara stood in the quiet room, dawnlight now spilling golden through the windows, and wondered what it meant that a vampire trusted her with his ghosts. She finished her breakfast slowly, watching the sun rise over the forest. Somewhere in the house below, Adrian was settling into whatever passed for sleep among the undead, vulnerable, trusting her not to drive a stake through his heart. The thought should have comforted her, proof she held power here, that she wasn't entirely helpless. Instead, she found herself hoping he rested well. Chapter 4. Between the Pajesti library was a cathedral of books. Alara stood in the doorway, momentarily breathless. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined every wall, accessible by rolling ladders of dark wood and brass. A fireplace dominated one end, cold now, but clearly well used, flanked by deep leather chairs worn soft with age. 3 tall windows let in morning light that fell across reading tables stacked with open volumes. As if Adrian had left mid-study, she moved deeper into the room, trailing her bandaged fingers along leather spines. Latin, French, German. English languages she recognized and some she didn't. Medical texts from the 1700s, philosophy, poetry, entire sections devoted to what she could only call occult studies grimoires, and treatises on blood magic, the nature of immortality, the hierarchies of vampire houses. One shelf held novels. She pulled out a copy of Frankenstein, the binding so worn it must have been a first edition. Inside, a woman's handwriting. Catherine Thorne, 1818. A gift from my darling husband, who understands the monster's loneliness. Lara's throat tightened. She carefully returned the book to its place, near the window. She found what she was looking for, a section of newer works, novels from the past 50 years. She selected Jane Eyre and settled into one of the leather chairs, tucking her feet beneath her. The house was quiet except for the ticking of a distant clock. No servants. No sounds of life. Just her and the sleeping vampire somewhere in the floors below. She should be terrified, planning escape. Instead, she turned to the first page and began to read. Hours passed. The sun tracked across the floor. She lost herself in Jane's struggles, her defiance, her refusal to be diminished. When she finally looked up, the light had shifted to late afternoon gold. A piece of paper lay on the table beside her chair. Lara's heart stuttered. She knew she'd been alone. The library door hadn't opened. Yet there it was, heavy parchment, folded once, her name written across it in elegant script. She opened it with trembling fingers. There's tea in the kitchen if you can find it. I'm told it helps with nerves. The house won't harm you, it's merely curious about you. It's been a long time since we had a guest. Eighth house was curious about her, as if the building itself were alive. Lara stood slowly, looking around the library with new awareness. The candles in their sconces, the books perfectly shelved, the dust that should coat everything but didn't. The house wasn't just preserved, it was maintained. By magic, older than she could comprehend. She found the kitchen through trial and error, following corridors that seemed to guide her steps. It was massive, designed for a staff that no longer existed, but spotlessly clean. Copper pots hung from hooks. A cast iron stove sat cold, but ready. And on the wooden table, a tea service had been laid out, porcelain cups, a steaming pot, small cakes that smelled of honey and lavender, the house providing for her. Because Adrian had asked it to. Or because it had its own intentions. She poured tea with shaking hands, and sat at the servants' table, feeling like an intruder in a fairy tale. The tea was perfect, strong, slightly sweet, exactly what she needed. You're being ridiculous, she told herself aloud. Her voice echoed strangely in the empty kitchen. Drinking tea made by a haunted house while a vampire sleeps upstairs. This is madness. But what was sanity worth when your husband had been a liar and your life a performance? At least here, the monsters were honest about what they were. She explored after the tea, emboldened by daylight and solitude. The ground floor held formal rooms untouched by time, a ballroom with chandeliers draped in crystal, a dining room with a table that could seat 30, a music room with a pianoforte that looked playable. Each space was perfect, frozen, waiting for a life that had ended decades ago. She avoided the east wing. Whatever ghosts Adrian kept there, they weren't hers to disturb. Instead, she climbed to the third floor, where she found what must have been his study. Unlike the formal rooms below, this space showed signs of actual use. Books lay open on every surface. Papers covered the desk, letters in various languages, maps marked with territories and dates, diagrams of what looked like family trees but with far too many branches. She shouldn't pry. She knew that. But her eyes caught on a letter written in English, dated 3 days ago. Lord Thornhouse Corvus offers final terms. Cede the Northern Territory by the new moon or face extermination. Your house is dead. Your bloodline ended. You cannot stand alone against 7 houses allied. Accept mercy while it's offered. Lord Corvus even houses, all against him. And he'd refused, because surrender isn't in his nature. Lara spun. Adrian stood in the doorway, still dressed in the same torn coat from last night, his hair loose around his shoulders. The sun hadn't quite set. She could see the last golden light through the windows, but the shadows were deep enough to allow him movement. I'm sorry, she said quickly. I shouldn't have. You're curious. It's natural. He moved into the room, keeping to the shadows, and began gathering the scattered papers with methodical precision. Though I'd prefer you ask rather than search. Would you answer? Probably not, but I'd appreciate the courtesy. He set the papers in a drawer and turned to face her. Did you find the library tolerable? It's magnificent. She gestured to the study around them. Your whole house is magnificent, and terrifying, and impossible. An apt description of my entire existence. He leaned against the desk, and she noticed the weariness in his posture. Day sleep hadn't been restful. 7 houses want me dead, Alara. They've wanted it for years. I'm the last of the old guard who remembers the laws before they were corrupted. I refuse to keep thralls, refuse to feed on the unwilling, refuse to bow to their new order. So you'll die for principle? If necessary. No hesitation. Better let them become what they are. And what about me? The question came out sharper than intended. When they kill you, what happens to your unwilling houseguest? Something dark crossed his face. That won't happen. You can't promise that. No, he met her eyes, and she saw the truth. They're ancient and tired and absolutely certain. But I can promise I'll fight like hell to prevent it. You're under my protection now. That means something. Why? She stepped closer, drawn by the intensity in his gaze. Why does it matter? You don't know me. Because he stopped, jaw tightening. Then, quieter, because you remind me that some things are still worth protecting. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning she didn't quite understand. Outside, the sun finally slipped below the horizon. Chapter 5. Truth spoken in twilight. Night transformed the house. Alara felt at the moment the sun disappeared, a subtle shift, as if the building itself had taken a breath. The candles throughout the manor blazed brighter. Distant sounds echoed through the halls, footsteps that belonged to no one, whispers in rooms that should be empty. Adrian straightened from the desk, rolling his shoulders like a man waking from restless sleep. Color returned to his face, still pale, but no longer corpse-like. His eyes brightened to that unsettling luminescence. You're stronger at night, Alara observed. The sun weakens us. Doesn't destroy, despite the myths, but it drains. Makes us slow, vulnerable. He moved to the window, no longer avoiding the glass. Beyond, the forest was a mass of shadows. Night is when we're truly alive. If alive is the right word, what would you call it? Cursed, blessed, damned. He glanced at her. Depends on the century you ask me. Alara joined him at the window, maintaining careful distance. You've lived through so much. Seen empires rise and fall. Don't you get tired of it? Every single day. The admission was quiet, raw. I've outlived everyone I've ever loved. Watched the world change beyond recognition. There are nights I stand on the roof and wonder why I keep going. Why do you? He was silent for a long moment. Spite, mostly. House Corvus wants my territory, my death. Giving them the satisfaction feels like defeat. He turned to face her fully. And occasionally, something unexpected happens. Like a widow crashing into my forest, reminding me that the world still holds surprises. Heat crept into Alara's cheeks. She looked away, focusing on the darkened forest. I'm not a surprise. I'm a complication. You're both. There was something almost like warmth in his voice. Come, if you're going to be trapped here, you should understand what you're trapped in. I'll show you the wards. He led her downstairs and outside, into the formal gardens behind the manor. They'd been magnificent once she could see the bones of it in the overgrown hedges and wild roses that climbed the stone walls. A fountain stood at the center, 3 tiers of carved marble depicting scenes she couldn't quite make out in the darkness. Adrian walked to the fountain and placed his palm against the lowest tier. Light bloomed beneath his hand, not candlelight, but something colder, bluer. Symbols carved into the stone began to glow, spreading outward in concentric circles that encompassed the entire garden. The house, the grounds beyond, blood wards, he said. Keyed to my bloodline. No vampire can cross them without invitation. No magic can breach them without my consent. They've held for 200 years. The symbols pulse like a heartbeat, beautiful and terrifying. Your blood? Alara asked, mixed with salt and silver, and words of power older than Christianity. He removed his hand, and the light faded, though she could still feel it humming beneath the surface. I renew them monthly. The last renewal was 2 weeks ago, which means they're strong. Camille can't touch you here. What if she tricks me into leaving? She'll try. He began walking the perimeter, and Alara followed. Vampires are master manipulators. She might appear as someone you trust, a friend from the village, your late husband, even me. You must remember, anyone who appears outside these wards and asks you to come to them is an enemy. How will I know it's really you if you need me outside? I won't ask you to come outside. His voice was firm. Not until this is over. I'll handle House Corvus myself. 7 houses against 1. Alara stopped walking, forcing him to face her. Those aren't odds you can survive. Probably not. He said it calmly, as if discussing the weather. But I've survived worse. In 1847, House Draven sent assassins, 12 of them. I killed 9, drove off the rest. In 1923, Lord Blackwood challenged me to formal combat. I took his head with his own sword. You're trying to impress me with your violence? I'm trying to reassure you that I'm not helpless. He stepped closer, and she caught his scent, old books and bergamot and something darker underneath. I've held this territory through wars and plagues and centuries of enemies. I don't intend to fall now, because of spite, because of you. The words hit her like a physical blow. Alara stared at him, searching for deception in those ancient eyes, but found only brutal honesty. You don't know me, she whispered. I know you're brave. You ran into my forest alone rather than face a false life. You didn't scream when you saw what I am. You sat at my table and asked questions instead of begging for mercy. His hand lifted, hesitated, then gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. His touch was ice cold, but impossibly careful. I know you deserve better than to die in a war between monsters. Alara's breath caught. She should step back. Should remind him of the distance between mortal and vampire, human and predator. But she couldn't move. What do you need from me? She asked instead. To survive this? Stay within the wards. Trust me. And he faltered, something almost vulnerable crossing his features. Tell me about your life, your marriage. What brought you to that forest? Why? Because I've forgotten what it means to know someone, to care about their story. His hand dropped. And because if I'm going to die protecting you, I'd like to know who I'm dying for. The stark honesty of it undid something in Alara's chest. She looked up at this ancient creature who'd killed and survived and endured centuries of loneliness, and saw something achingly human in his expression. My husband married me for my dowry, she said quietly. I married him because my family needed the alliance. We were strangers who shared a house. When he died, I felt relief, then guilt for feeling relief. Then anger when I found the letters and realized he'd stolen from my family, that everything we'd sacrificed meant nothing. So you ran. So I ran. She wrapped her arms around herself. Stupid, really. I had nowhere to go. No money of my own. Just rage and grief and freedom, Adrian finished. You chose freedom over safety. That's not stupid. It's brave. Brave would be fighting back. I just fled. You're here now. Fighting for your survival. He gestured to the glowing wards around them. That's a kind of battle. A sound shattered the moment, a howl, distant but unmistakable. Wolf-like but wrong, carrying a note too intelligent to be animal. Adrian's expression went hard. Inside, now. What is that? Corvus scouts. Testing the wards. He took her arm, already pulling her toward the house. They're closer than I expected. Another howl answered the first. Then another. The forest around them came alive with movement. They ran. Chapter 6. The siege begins. They barely made it through the door before shapes materialized at the edge of the wards. Alara pressed against the foyer wall, her heart hammering, watching through the window as figures emerged from the forest. Not human anymore, they'd dropped the pretense. Wolves the size of horses, their eyes gleaming red in the darkness. Behind them, vampires in various states of transformation, some still wearing human faces, others revealing the predator beneath. Camille stood at their center, pale hair glowing like moonlight. Adrian. Her voice carried clearly despite the closed doors and windows. We know you have the mortal. Send her out, and we'll grant you another month to consider Lord Corvus's terms. Adrian stood motionless in the center of the foyer, every line of his body taut with controlled fury. She's under my protection. You'll get nothing. Stubborn even now. Camille smiled, and even from this distance Alara could see the cruelty in it. Very well. We have all night, and tomorrow night, and every night after, until you break. She raised her hand. The creatures around her began to circle the property, testing the wards, probing for weakness. Each time they touched the invisible barrier, blue light flared and they recoiled with snarls of pain, but they didn't stop. They kept coming, over and over, wearing down the defenses through sheer persistence. How long will the wards hold? Alara's voice came out steadier than she felt. Against this? Weeks if they maintain this pace. Adrian turned from the window, his expression grim. But they won't maintain it. They'll escalate. What does that mean? It means we need to prepare. He strode toward the back of the house, clearly expecting her to follow. There are things you should know. Things that might keep you alive if the worst happens. They descended to a part of the house Alara hadn't yet explored below the kitchens. Down stone steps, worn smooth with age, into what could only be called a vault. The temperature dropped with each step. Her breath misted in the air. Adrian lit candles with a gesture, revealing a circular chamber lined with weapons. Swords, daggers, crossbows, and things she didn't have names for, all displayed like a museum of violence. In the center of the room sat a heavy wooden table covered in leather-bound journals and loose papers. "This is my armory," he said simply, "and my research. Everything I've learned about House Corvus over the past century." Alara moved to the table, scanning the documents. Battle plans, lists of names crossed out dead, she assumed. Maps showing territory divisions that had shifted over decades. And sketches, detailed anatomical drawings showing vampire weaknesses. "You've been planning for this," she said, "for 50 years. He joined her at the table, pulling out a specific journal. "Since Lord Corvus first approached me with his vision of a new order, vampires ruling openly, keeping human cattle, feeding at will. Everything the old laws were designed to prevent. And you refused." "I refused. As did 3 other houses." His finger traced a map, pointing to crossed-out territories. House Moreau fell in 1979, House Ashford in 1992, House Sterling 3 years ago. "I'm all that's left of the opposition." The weight of it settled over Alara. One vampire against an empire. No wonder he seemed tired. "Why do they want you dead specifically?" she asked. "Why not just ignore you?" "Because I remember." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "I remember when we were hunted, when we hid in shadows and crypts, surviving only through secrecy and discretion. I remember the terror we caused before the old laws brought order. And I remember what happened when we broke those laws, entire vampire lineages destroyed by human witch hunters. Villages burned, centuries of knowledge lost. You're a reminder of consequence." "Exactly." He closed the journal. "As long as I exist, I prove that their way isn't the only way. That vampires can coexist with humans without domination. Corvus can't allow that challenge to stand." Above them, something heavy struck the house. The walls shuddered. Dust sifted down from the ceiling. Adrian's head snapped up. "They're bringing siege weapons. Faster than I expected." Another impact, harder this time. The candles flickered. "What do we do?" Alara hated the fear in her voice. "You stay here. This vault is the most protected part of the house. Stone walls 3 feet thick, wards carved into every surface." He was already moving toward the stairs. "I'll reinforce the outer defenses." "Alone? Against all of them?" "I've done it before." He paused on the steps, looking back at her. "Alara, I need you to promise me something." "What?" "If they breach the house, if they get past me, there's a passage behind the western wall in this vault." He pointed to what looked like solid stone. "Press the 3rd brick from the floor, 2nd from the left. It opens to tunnels that run for miles. They'll take you to the village. I'm not leaving you." "You will if I'm dead." His voice was hard. "Promise me. I can face them knowing I failed my territory, my house, my principles. But I can't face them knowing I let you die for stubbornness." The raw emotion in his words stunned her. This ancient vampire, this creature who'd survived centuries, cared more about her safety than his own survival. "I promise," she whispered. "Good." He started up the stairs, then stopped once more. "Alara, when Catherine died, I thought I'd never care about another person's fate again. I was wrong." Then he was gone, his footsteps fading as he ascended to face the siege. Alara stood alone in the vault, surrounded by weapons and war journals, listening to the thunder of impacts against the house. Each strike made her flinch. Each moment of silence afterward stretched her nerves tighter. She should hide, should find that escape passage and memorize the route, should prepare to run. Instead, she found herself studying the weapons on the walls. A crossbow that looked well maintained, bolts tipped with silver, a dagger with a grip worn smooth from use. If Adrian fell, they'd come for her. And she'd be damned if she went without a fight. She selected the dagger, testing its weight. The blade caught the candlelight, sharp and deadly. Above, the battle had begun in earnest. She heard roars, crashes, and once terrifyingly Adrian's voice raised in words that sounded like Latin, each syllable cracking with power. Alara gripped the dagger and waited. The siege of Thorn Manor had begun. Chapter 7. Blood and Ingenuity. The assault lasted 3 hours. Alara tracked time by the candles burning down, by the rhythm of impacts against the house growing more frenzied, then sporadic, then finally silent. The quiet was somehow worse than the noise. She crept up the stairs, dagger clutched in her bandaged hand, straining to hear any sound that might tell her who had won. The house was dark. The candles that had burned so faithfully had gone out, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Moonlight streamed through the tall windows, casting everything in silver and shadow. Adrian? Her voice barely rose above a whisper. No answer. She moved through the ground floor, checking each room. The ballroom empty. The dining hall untouched. The library, a figure slumped in one of the leather chairs, head bowed, shoulders shaking. Alara's heart seized. She raised the dagger, ready to defend herself, then stopped. It was Adrian. But wrong. His coat was shredded, hanging in tatters. Dark blood, his blood soaked through his shirt and dripped onto the floor. His hands gripped the chair arms so tightly the wood had splintered. Don't. His voice was rough, strained. Don't come closer. You're hurt. I'm hungry. The word came out like a growl. I used too much power. Burned through my reserves. I need. He cut himself off, his whole body tensing. Go back to the vault. Lock yourself in. Now. But Alara saw the way he was shaking, the pallor of his skin, even in moonlight. Saw the wounds that should have healed already, still bleeding freely. He'd burned himself out defending her. How do you feed? She asked, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. Without killing? Alara, I'm not having this conversation. Answer me. She took one step closer. Small amounts? Willing donors? What do you need? His head snapped up, eyes blazing red instead of their usual pale luminescence. Inhuman, predatory. I need to hunt, to chase and catch and drain. The curse demands it when we're wounded, when we've used too much power. Right now every instinct I have is screaming at me to. He stopped, jaw clenched so hard she heard teeth crack. Get out. Instead, Alara set down the dagger and moved closer. You said you don't take unwilling lives, she said quietly. I believe you, but I'm offering, willingly, whatever you need to heal. No, the word was absolute. I won't. I can't. If I start, I might not stop. And I'd rather die than hurt you. Then we'll die together when Corvus comes back tomorrow night. She stood before him now, close enough to see the war raging in his expression. Hunger versus control, need versus honor. Because you can't defend this house in your current state. We both know it. There are other ways. I can send word to the village. Hire blood. There's no time. She held out her wrist. Please, let me help you the way you've helped me. This isn't help. This is. His eyes fixed on her wrist, on the pulse point visible beneath her pale skin. This is dangerous. So is everything else about this situation. She knelt before him, the same gesture he'd made when tending her wounds. A strange symmetry. You said you'd fight like hell to keep me alive. Let me return the favor. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Adrian's hand came up, trembling, and caught her wrist with infinite gentleness. His thumb rested against her pulse. Tell me to stop, he said hoarsely. The moment. It's too much. Promise me. I promise. He pulled her closer, his other hand cradling the back of her head, positioning her. His face hovered near the crook of her neck, and she felt him shudder with the effort of restraint. I'm sorry, he whispered. Then his fangs pierced her throat. The pain was sharp, bright, gone in an instant. What followed was something Alara had no name for. A pull, a connection, warmth spreading through her veins like wine. She felt his hunger, his desperate need, the edge of madness that came from deprivation. But beneath it, something else, gratitude, gentleness. An iron will keeping the monster chained. He drank carefully, controlled, nothing like the violence she'd witnessed in the clearing. His hand in her hair anchored her, kept her steady. She felt her heartbeat slow, her breathing deepen. Distantly, she knew she should be terrified. She wasn't. After what felt like both seconds and hours, he pulled away. His tongue swept across the wound. She felt it seal, felt the sharp pain fade to nothing. He released her and immediately retreated to the far side of the chair, putting distance between them. Alara swayed, dizzy. Adrian was there instantly, steadying her, guiding her into the chair he'd vacated. Stay still, he commanded, his voice rough but clear now. You'll be lightheaded for a few minutes. She watched as he paced, watched color return to his face, watched the wounds on his chest and arms begin to close. The transformation was remarkable from broken to whole in the space of minutes. You didn't take much, she observed. I took enough to heal. Not enough to harm you. He stopped pacing, running a hand through his hair. God, I shouldn't have. That was unconscionable. It was necessary. Alara pushed herself upright, testing her balance. Dizzy, yes, but steady enough. And I offered. You shouldn't have had to. He looked at her with something like anguish. I brought you here, put you in danger, and now I've saved my life multiple times? She managed a weak smile. I'm noticing a pattern. He didn't return the smile. This changes things. My blood is in you now. You'll heal faster for a few days. Be stronger. But it also means Corvus can track you more easily. Any vampire can sense my mark on you. Your mark? When we feed from someone, it leaves a signature, temporary, unless renewed. But while it lasts, other vampires will know you're claimed. His expression darkened. Protected, in the old customs. But those customs mean nothing to House Corvus. Alara processed this. So I'm marked territory now? You're under my protection, officially, not just practically. He finally met her eyes. Which means if they capture you, they'll use you to hurt me. More than they would have before. Then we don't let them capture me. Alara no, she stood, gripping the chair for balance. No more apologies. No more guilt. You needed blood to survive. I gave it willingly. We move forward. He stared at her, something like wonder crossing his features. You're remarkable. You know that? I'm practical. But warmth bloomed in her chest at the compliment. What happens now? Now we prepare for tomorrow night. Because they'll come back. And this time a sound cut him off. Scratching. At the front door. Deliberate. Taunting. Adrian moved to the window in an instant. Alara joined him, written in what looked like blood across the door. The mortal smells of you now, Thorn. We'll make you watch her die. Chapter 8. Lessons in the dark. Hadrian had the message scrubbed away before dawn, but the threat lingered like a stain. They didn't speak about it. Didn't acknowledge the words that had been carved into Alara's mind as surely as they'd been written across the door. Instead, Adrian became distant, professional, retreating into strategy and preparation. Alara found him in the library as the sun rose, surrounded by maps and journals. His hands stained with ink. You need to sleep, she said from the doorway. I need to plan. He didn't look up. They'll come with more force tonight. Different tactics. I need to anticipate Adrian. She crossed to the table, gently placing her hand over the journal he was writing in. You'll be useless if you don't rest. His hand stilled beneath hers. For a moment she thought he'd argue. Then his shoulders sagged just slightly. I keep seeing it, he said quietly. Every possible way they could hurt you. Every scenario where I'm not fast enough, strong enough, smart enough to stop them. That's not planning. That's torture, perhaps. He finally looked at her, and the vulnerability in his eyes struck her breathless. I haven't cared about anyone's survival but my own in 80 years. I'd forgotten how terrible it feels. Alara pulled out a chair and sat across from him. Tell me about the vampire laws. The real ones, not Corvus's version. If I'm going to survive in this world, I need to understand it. He studied her for a long moment, then seemed to come to a decision. All right, but first, how do you feel? Any weakness? Dizziness? She took stock of herself. The lightheadedness from last night had faded. If anything, she felt unusually alert, energized despite the hour. I feel fine. Good actually. The blood exchange. You'll feel its effects for 3 to 5 days. He pushed aside his journals, focusing on her completely. What do you want to know? Everything. Start with the houses. Over the next hours, as dawn, light filled the library, Adrian taught her. He spoke of the 7 great vampire houses, each controlling territories across Europe and the Americas. House Corvus, ambitious and ruthless, based in Paris. House Draven in Prague. House Moreau, fallen, once ruled Lyon. House Sterling, also destroyed, had held Edinburgh. He explained the old laws, rules forged centuries ago to prevent vampire society from collapsing into chaos. The law of sanctuary. The prohibition against creating vampires without consent. The requirement that feeding be willing, or at minimum, survivable. Corvus sees these as weaknesses, Adrian said. He believes vampires should rule as apex predators, not hide among sheep. What do you believe? I believe predators who kill all their prey starve. He stood, moving to the window, where sunlight stopped just short of his skin. We're parasites, Alara. We need humans to survive. The old laws weren't morality, they were practical survival. Keep the herds healthy. Don't draw attention. Live in the shadows and endure, but you enforce them like they're moral laws, because I've seen what happens when we don't. His voice went cold, distant. In 1789, during the Terror in France, young vampires fed openly on the chaos, created dozens of new vampires without training or control. Within months, Paris was overrun. The human authorities didn't understand what they were fighting, but they fought anyway. Hundreds of vampires died, thousands of humans. I was there, helping burn the bodies. Alara absorbed this. You're trying to prevent another war. I'm trying to prevent extinction. Ours and yours. He turned back to face her. If Corvus has his way, humans will eventually unite against us. And there are billions of you, millions of us. We'd lose. So you're protecting humanity by protecting the old laws? I'm protecting everyone by insisting we remember our place in the ecosystem. He returned to the table, sitting heavily. Not that it matters. One vampire can't stop 7 houses. Then don't fight alone. There's no one left to fight with me. There's me. Adrian laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're brave, Alara, but you're human. You can't. I saved you last night. The words came out sharper than intended. My blood healed you. Human ingenuity can be its own kind of power. He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. You're right, he said finally. You did save me. I'm sorry for dismissing. Teach me. She leaned forward. Not just vampire history. Teach me how to fight them, how to survive. Alara, you said they can track me now. That I'm marked. Running won't save me. She held his gaze. But knowledge might. So teach me their weaknesses, their habits, everything that might give me an advantage. For a long moment, Adrian studied her. Then something shifted in his expression, resignation giving way to something like respect. All right, he said. But first, you need rest. The blood exchange will have exhausted you more than you realize. Sleep. Tonight will begin. Tonight? That's when they attack. They won't attack at dusk. Too predictable. He began gathering his journals. They'll wait until deep night, when I'm strongest, but most focused on defense. They'll test different approaches, probe for weaknesses. We'll have time. Alara wanted to argue, but a wave of exhaustion hit her suddenly, as if his mention of rest had given her body permission to acknowledge how tired it was. Fine, she conceded. But wake me if anything happens. I will. He paused at the library door. Alara, thank you for trusting me enough to let me feed. I know what that cost. It cost nothing. She stood, steadying herself against the table. You've given me sanctuary, safety. The least I can do is help you maintain it. It's more than that. His voice was quiet. You gave me something I thought I'd lost. Hope that I'm not fighting this alone. Before she could respond, he was gone, moving with that unnatural vampire speed. Leaving her alone in the morning light, Alara climbed to her room. Her mind churning with vampire politics and ancient laws and the impossible situation she'd found herself in. She should be terrified, should be planning escape despite the danger. Instead, she found herself thinking about the careful way Adrian had held her while feeding. The restraint, the iron control, the gratitude in his voice afterward. She touched her neck where his fangs had pierced. The skin was smooth, unmarked, but she swore she could still feel the ghost of connection between them. Dangerous, she told herself. This is dangerous, but as she fell into sleep, she couldn't quite convince herself to care. Chapter 9. The weight of Koasir awoke to darkness and the sound of rain against her window. For a disoriented moment, she thought she was back in her marriage bed, listening to the storm that had raged the night her husband died. Then reality reasserted itself. The unfamiliar room, the silk nightgown, the faint hum of wards protecting the house, a knock at her door. Soft but deliberate. Come in, she called. Sitting up, Adrian entered carrying a tray laden with food, bread, cheese, grapes, cold chicken. He'd changed clothes, now wearing a simple white shirt and dark trousers that looked like they belonged to an earlier century. His hair was tied back, revealing the sharp angles of his face. You let me sleep all day, Alara said, noting the darkness beyond her windows. You needed it. The blood exchange takes a toll. He set the tray on the writing desk. Eat. Then we train. They haven't attacked yet? No, as I suspected. They're waiting. Building our anticipation. He moved to the window, peering out at the storm. It's a psychological tactic. Let us wonder when the strike will come. Make us flinch at every sound. Alara rose, wrapping the dressing gown around herself, and approached the tray. Her stomach growled at the sight of food. Does it work? The anticipation? On mortals, yes. On vampires? He shrugged. We have time to spare. But it still wears on the nerves. She ate quickly, efficiently, aware of him watching her with that unsettling focus. When she finished, she turned to face him fully. What do you need me to learn? Silver. He produced a dagger from his coat different from the one she'd taken from the vault, smaller, with a blade that gleamed like moonlight. Pure silver burns us, wounds us in ways that heal slowly. If you're cornered, aim for major arteries. Femoral, carotid, subclavian. Blood loss weakens us faster than injury. He handed her the dagger. It was heavier than she expected, perfectly balanced. What about stakes? She asked. The stories say wood through the heart kills us, yes. But it's harder than you think. You need force, accuracy, and we're fast. He pulled his shirt aside, revealing pale skin and the defined muscle beneath. His finger tapped his chest, left of center. Here, straight in, no hesitation. But understand, if you're close enough to stake a vampire, you're close enough for them to kill you first. Alara stared at the point he'd indicated, fighting the urge to trace it with her fingers. What about fire? Effective, but indiscriminate. If you set a vampire ablaze, you'll likely burn the house down too. He stepped back, buttoning his shirt. The sun is your best weapon, but only if you can survive until dawn. And decapitation? Works, but requires a very sharp blade and significant strength. His eyes met hers. I'm being honest with you, Alara. Your chances of killing a vampire in direct combat are minimal. This training is about buying time, creating opportunities to escape. What if I don't want to escape? The words surprised her even as she spoke them. What if I want to fight beside you? Adrian's expression hardened. That's not. You keep treating me like I'm fragile, like I'm something to be protected and hidden away. She gripped the silver dagger. But I chose to stay. I chose to feed you. I'm choosing now to learn. Stop deciding my fate for me. I'm trying to keep you alive. By making me helpless? She took a step forward. You said I reminded you of what's worth protecting. Well, maybe you remind me that I'm capable of more than playing the dutiful widow. That I can fight for something that matters. This isn't your fight, it is now. She held up her wrist, where no mark was visible, but they both knew his blood ran in her veins. You said yourself I'm marked, protected, claimed. Whether I like it or not, I'm part of this war. Adrian ran a hand through his hair, disturbing the tie that held it back. Dark strands fell across his face, making him look less like an ancient lord and more like a man pushed to his limits. If they capture you, he said, voice low and dangerous, they will hurt you in ways I cannot prevent. They will use you to break me. And it will work, Alara. It will absolutely work. The raw admission hung between them like a confession. Then teach me how not to be captured, she said quietly. Make me dangerous enough that they think twice. He stared at her for a long moment. Something warring behind his eyes, fear and admiration, frustration and something deeper she couldn't name. Fine, he said finally. But we do this properly. No half measures. He spent the next hours teaching her things no lady should know. How to strike at vulnerable points, eyes, throat, joints. How to use an attacker's momentum against them. How to fall without breaking bones. How to feint. How to make herself a difficult target. She was clumsy at first, unused to violence, her corset and dress restricting movement. Adrian vanished briefly and returned with men's clothing, shirt, trousers, boots that almost fit. Propriety has no place in survival, he said, leaving her to change. When she emerged in the borrowed clothes, something shifted in his expression. He looked away quickly, but not before she caught heat in his gaze that had nothing to do with hunger. They continued training, his hands correcting her stance, adjusting her grip on the dagger. Each touch was professional, necessary, but Alara felt the charge between them building like the storm outside. Again, he commanded. After she botched a defensive move for the third time, she lunged. He sidestepped easily, catching her wrist and using her momentum to spin her around. Her back pressed against his chest, his arm across her throat in a hold that could snap her neck with the slightest pressure. You're dead, he murmured against her ear. Alara's breath came fast, but not entirely from exertion. She was acutely aware of every point where their bodies touched, his chest against her back, his arm across her collarbone, his breath cool against her neck. Show me how to escape, she managed. Instead of releasing her, he paused. His arm loosened slightly. She felt him breathe in, sending her, and remembered what he'd said about vampires tracking blood. Adrian, a massive impact shook the house. Then another, and another. They broke apart. Adrian moved to the window in an instant, his entire demeanor transforming from teacher to predator. They're here, he said. And they've brought siege equipment. Below, illuminated by lightning, Alara could see them, dozens of vampires, surrounding the property. And at their center, a massive battering ram carved with symbols that glowed sickly green. Blood magic, Adrian breathed. They're going to break the wards. Another impact. The house shuddered. Somewhere downstairs, glass shattered. How long do we have? Alara gripped the silver dagger, her training suddenly very real. Adrian's jaw set. Minutes. Maybe less. Then we fight. He looked at her, really looked at her, and something in his expression broke and reformed all at once. Together, he said. The battering ram struck again. The wards flickered, blue light pulsing weakly. The final siege had begun. Chapter 10. When walls fall, the wards shattered with a sound like breaking crystal. Blue light exploded outward, then dissolved into nothing. The humming protection that had surrounded the house for 200 years died in an instant, leaving only silence and the drumming rain. The vault, Adrian commanded, already moving. Now. You said we'd fight together, and we will. From a defensible position, he grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the stairs. The vault has secondary wards. It'll buy us time. They ran through darkened corridors, past paintings whose subjects seemed to watch with knowing eyes. Behind them, Alara heard the front door splinter, heard inhuman voices calling out in triumph. Adrian Thorne. Camille's voice echoed through the manor. Your sanctuary is broken. Surrender the mortal in yourself, and we'll grant you a warrior's death. Adrian didn't respond. He pulled Alara into the kitchen, toward the servants' stairs that led down to the vault. They were halfway there when a figure materialized in front of them. Male, tall, with eyes like burned gold, and a smile full of sharp teeth. Going somewhere? He asked. Adrian shoved Alara behind him and drew a sword that had been strapped to his back. When had he armed himself? The blade gleamed silver in the darkness. Matthias, Adrian said coldly. Still Camille's lapdog, I see. Still pretending you're better than us, I see. Matthias circled, forcing them back toward the kitchen proper. The mortal smells delicious, by the way. I can taste your blood in her from here. Tell me, did she beg when you fed? She offered. Adrian's voice was ice. A concept foreign to House Corvus, I'm sure. Matthias lunged. The fight was faster than Alara's eyes could track. Silver blade meeting clawed hands, both vampires moving with impossible speed. They crashed through the kitchen table, sending pots and pans clattering. Adrian drew first blood, his sword, opening a gash across Matthias's chest, but Matthias was younger, faster. He got inside Adrian's guard, slamming him against the wall hard enough to crack stone. Alara didn't think. She lunged forward with the silver dagger, driving it into Matthias's shoulder. He screamed, whirling on her with fury in his golden eyes. You little. Adrian's sword took his head. It happened so quickly Alara barely processed it. One moment, Matthias was reaching for her. The next, his body was crumpling, his head rolling across the floor, dissolving into ash before it stopped moving. Adrian stood over the remains, chest heaving. Are you hurt? No, She stared at the ash. I helped kill him. You saved my life. He gripped her shoulders, forcing her to look at him instead of the remains. You were magnificent, but we need to move. More are coming. As if summoned by his words, footsteps thundered above them. Multiple vampires searching the upper floors. They made it to the vault stairs. Adrian sealed the door behind them with a gesture and a word of power. But Alara could already hear scratching on the other side. Testing, probing. The vault was, as she remembered, circular, lined with weapons, the heavy table covered in journals. But now she noticed the symbols carved into every surface, glowing faintly with protective magic. These wards are older, Adrian explained, breathing hard. Keyed to my blood directly, not the estate. They'll take longer to break. How much longer? An hour, maybe two. He moved to the table, pulling out maps and papers. Enough time to plan our escape. Through the tunnel you mentioned? It's our only option. He traced a route on the map with his finger. It exits 3 miles from here, near the old mill. From there, you can reach the village. What do you mean I can reach the village? Adrian didn't meet her eyes. I'll hold them here. Give you time to run. No, the word came out flat, absolute. We go together or not at all. Lara, be reasonable, I am being reasonable. She slammed her hand on the table. You can't fight them all. Even you admitted that. If you stay, you die. If I run alone, they'll hunt me. Our only chance is together. They want me, not you, they want both of us now. I killed one of theirs. I'm marked with your blood. She grabbed his hand, forcing him to face her. Stop trying to sacrifice yourself. There's another way. What way? Above them, something heavy struck the vault door. The wards flickered. Alara's mind raced. She thought of everything Adrian had taught her: vampire politics, house alliances, the old laws that Corvus claimed to despise but other houses might still honor. Witness testimony, she said suddenly. You said House Corvus breaks the old laws, that they keep thralls, feed without consent, create vampires recklessly. Yes, but what if we had proof? What if we could expose them to the other houses? Her thoughts tumbled out rapidly. You said not all houses support Corvus. Some only allied with him because they thought he'd win. If we could prove he's brought chaos, threatened the very secrecy vampires need to survive, they might withdraw support. Adrian's eyes widened with understanding. Or even turn on him to preserve themselves. Do you have evidence? Documentation? Decades worth. He gestured to the journals on the table. Witness accounts. Records of violations. I've been collecting it for years, hoping someday it would matter. Another impact on the door. Cracks spider webbed across the stone. Then we take it with us, Alar said. We run, yes, but not in defeat. We find allies. We build a case. We turn this war from 7 houses against one into something Corvus can't win. Adrian stared at her like she'd performed a miracle. You're suggesting we go on the offensive. I'm suggesting we survive long enough to make them regret attacking us. A smile touched his lips, the first real smile she'd seen from him. It transformed his face, made him look almost human, almost young. You are extraordinary, he said softly. I'm practical, but warmth flooded through her at the admiration in his voice. Now, which journals do we absolutely need? They worked quickly, sorting through decades of evidence. Adrian selected the most damning accounts: humans drained to death, vampires created without consent, entire families thralled and enslaved. He bound them in leather satchels that he could carry easily. The vault door cracked. Stone fragments fell inward. They had minutes at most. The passage, Adrian said, moving to the western wall. He pressed the sequence of bricks he'd shown her before. Stone ground against stone, revealing a dark tunnel that smelled of earth and age. It's a 3-mile run through absolute darkness, he warned. Stay close to me. Don't stop for anything. Alara nodded, gripping her silver dagger. The vault door exploded inward. Camille stood in the breach, surrounded by a dozen vampires. Her pale hair was wild, her smile vicious. Running, Adrian? How disappointing. Surviving, he corrected. Something you should have learned. He grabbed Alara's hand and pulled her into the tunnel. Behind them, Camille's shriek of fury echoed off stone walls. They ran into darkness, toward an uncertain future, together. Chapter 11. The choice between worlds. The tunnel seemed endless. Alara ran until her lungs burned, her hand locked in Adrian's iron grip, the darkness so complete she might as well have been blind. Only his supernatural vision guided them through the twisting passage, around corners she couldn't see, over obstacles she didn't know existed until her feet found them. Behind them, pursuit echoed snarls, footsteps, Camille's voice promising violence. Almost there, Adrian urged, pulling her faster. The tunnel slopped upward. Fresh air touched Alara's face, carrying the scent of rain and forest. Ahead, she saw a faint circle of gray, the exit, obscured by overgrowth. They burst out into the storm, emerging behind the ruins of an old mill exactly as Adrian's map had shown. The rain was torrential, soaking them instantly, but Alara had never been so grateful for open sky. The village is east, Adrian said, orienting himself. We need to. A figure dropped from the mill's broken roof, landing between them and freedom. Camille, alone, but smiling with predatory confidence. Did you really think I wouldn't guard the obvious exits? She circled them slowly, rain streaming down her pale face. I've been hunting far longer than you've been lord of anything, Adrian. I know every tactical mistake before you make it. Adrian pushed Alara behind him, drawing his sword despite his obvious exhaustion. The run, the fighting, the blood he'd expended healing, all of it was taking its toll. Let her go, he said. Your quarrel is with me. My quarrel is with anyone who defies Lord Corvus. Camille's eyes flicked to Alara. But I admit, I'm curious about your pet mortal. What makes her worth this much trouble? She's under my protection, she's marked with your blood, carrying your scent, trained in your ways. Camille's smile widened. You've half turned her already, haven't you? Given her just enough to blur the line between mortal and ours. Tell me, does she know what that means? Alara felt Adrian tense. What is she talking about? Nothing when a vampire feeds from the same human repeatedly. Camille interrupted, delighted to twist the knife. When they share blood, it creates a bond. The human becomes stronger, faster, harder to kill, but also dependent, addicted to the vampire's presence. Eventually, they beg for the turning. They can't help it. Ice flooded through Alara's veins. She looked at Adrian's rigid back, saw the truth in the set of his shoulders. Is that true? Her voice came out steadier than she felt. It can be, Adrian said quietly. If the exchange is repeated, if the vampire wills it. But I wouldn't. One feeding won't create a bond, he continued, finally turning to face her. What we did was necessity, nothing more. You're not bound to me, Alara. I swear it. How touching. Camille's voice stripped mockery. The noble Lord Thorn, trying to preserve his honor even now. But it doesn't matter. You're both dead anyway. She moved. Adrian met her charge, steel clashing against claws. They fought with the desperate fury of ancient enemies, too fast for Alara to follow clearly. But she saw Adrian faltering, saw his movements slowing, saw Camille gaining ground. The journals. Adrian had dropped the satchels during the initial confrontation, and they lay in the mud a few feet away. Evidence that could turn houses against Corvus. Evidence worth dying for. Alara made a choice. She ran for the satchels, scooping them up even as Camille noticed and snarled. The vampire broke away from Adrian, lunging for Alara with murderous intent. Adrian threw himself between them. Camille's claws, meant for Alara's throat, tore into Adrian's chest instead. He went down hard, blood pouring from the wounds, too much blood to fast. No. Alara dropped beside him, pressing her hands against the injuries. The blood was cold, darker than human blood, soaking through her borrowed shirt. Run, Adrian gasped. Take the journals. Find House Moreau's remnants in Lyon. They'll help. I'm not leaving you. Alara. Camille grabbed Alara by the hair, hauling her backward. Pain exploded across her scalp as she was lifted off her feet. Enough sentiment, Camille hissed. Watch him die, mortal. Then join him.